everybody to PEC Match Point, your premier destination for news around the Power Esports Conference. We've got a packed show today. We had some massive matchups in Week 8 that we need to get to, and maybe almost one of the biggest upsets of the year. So stick around for highlights, reactions, debate from voices around the league. Carson Kass is going to join us for all the action in the premier FBS Esports League across the country. Big shout out to the Idaho Air National Guard, bringing you PEC Match Point every single week. And as I said, highlights from Week 8, Boise State and Ohio State, massive matchups in Overwatch, Minnesota with nearly the upset of the year in Rocket League. We'll get to all of that. Carson Kass going to join us live. He's going to break down fall in the PEC, and he believes that two teams are going to go undefeated all the way until Vegas. Is it Baylor Rocket League and Michigan State Smash, or is there somebody else he has a lot of confidence in? We'll hear from here coming up, and we'll look ahead to the final week of the PEC fall split. Week 9 has a couple of massive matchups that we need to talk about as these teams get ready to take a bit of a break, and they definitely all want to end with a win. But we start with Rocket League. It was Boise State and Ohio State. The Broncos continued their offensive onslaught in the PEC. They took down Ohio State 3-0, picked up their 6th win of the year. The Broncos outscored the Buckeyes 19-5 in the series. I think that's their second week in a row, winning by more than 10 goals overall. Dirt, though, led the way for Boise State with 9 goals. Absolutely impressive. Ohio State, the loss drops them down to 2-5. They're in 7th place in the standings. They did get a solid outing from Danwad, who put together 2 goals, but it wasn't quite enough. Michigan State also found a quick win this week. The Spartans took down Nebraska 3-0. They are now 5-2 on the year. The Cornhuskers made them work for it. Game 2 and 3 decided by only a single goal, as both teams had a strong defensive outing. Ottbaum led the way for Michigan State. 4 goals for him. Doubled Nebraska's scoring the entire series. At 2-5, the Cornhuskers find themselves down with Ohio State. They have quite a lot of ground to make up in the standings. Baylor, we're going to talk about them a lot on this show today because they are off next week, which means today was their final game in the PEC fall season, and they wrapped up an undefeated split, a perfect 8-0. They took down the Utes 3-0. Andy, with a 6-goal performance for the Bears, helped wrap up the perfect semester for the Utes. They do fall to 1-6, and despite a 3-goal performance from Brand J, they're going to look to regroup heading into that final week of the fall. But I talked about it in the start of the show. This was maybe the match of the year in PEC Rocket League, and you would not have expected it if you looked at the records. Kansas and Minnesota with an epic 5-game battles. The winless Gophers did everything they could to find their first win of the year. Every single game in the series decided by a goal. The Jayhawks had a heroic 3-goal performance from Alpaca in Game 5 with 90 seconds left to play. Kansas held a 3-0 lead in Game 5, but the Gophers came roaring back, and with 20 seconds left, down a goal, they're trying to force overtime.
30 seconds to do it. Kansas need to lock in here on the defense, and they'll get a really good clearance here. Nobody back from Minnesota, but that ball is going wide. No chance of an open net goal for Kansas tonight. 10 seconds left. If this result holds, Kansas will get the win this evening. If Minnesota in the next few seconds can find the equalizer, they keep their hopes alive.
An extra second, and I think Minnesota pulls that off. As we take a look again, Boise State, Michigan State, Baylor, all with those 3-0s. Kansas barely squeaking by this Minnesota squad as we take a look at our Rocket League standings. It is so incredibly close in Rocket League right now. Baylor, of course, at the top. They're sitting at 8-0. Boise State, again, the Bears are done, by the way. They have wrapped up this season. They're at 8-0. Boise State right behind them at 6-1. Most likely the Broncos might move to 7-1. They have Nebraska next week. Michigan State at 5-2. Syracuse, by the way, they started the year 1-3. We're going to talk more with Carson about them. They're at 4-3. Kansas with that very close win at 4-3. And then Nebraska, Ohio State 2-5. Utah 1-6. But don't let the Gophers record fool you. They gave Kansas every single inch that they could handle, but they're unfortunately stuck down at 0-7. Moving on to Overwatch, this was one of the big matchups we had circled. Ohio State and Boise State, and it was only a matter of time before the defending PEC champion Broncos came alive, and what better time to do it than a showdown against undefeated Ohio State. The Buckeyes and Broncos had an epic 5-game series. Boise State down 2-1 after 3 games, ripped off back-to-back wins, and of course, Kings Row had to go into overtime. Both teams captured all 3 points in regulation, but the Broncos needed just 1 tick in overtime to pull out the win.
right-hand side is going to force
Lots
King Donut
of damage
backwards.
onto him. He's hurting. Mafia's getting hurt too. They're already on the capture point. They're pushing real fast halfway to that first tick. All they need, getting contested. Maxwell takes out Eom. That's one of their DPS players.
King Donut's alone on the point. It's
and
Mafia's
he's
there
getting
too.
taken down.
But
They're building
Maxwell's
up the
gone.
point.
Maxwell
Right on there.
on a tear.
Clear.
He's
That's
fighting
it.
a third. And
Boise
Clear's going to
State.
close it out. Boise State wins.
Absolutely electric here in Boise to pick up that win. As we head on to Utah versus Baylor, the Utes at one point were the hottest team in PEC. There were talks they might surge into the top half of the standings, but they unfortunately have cooled off in recent weeks. But the Utes did get back to their winning ways. A quick 3-0 against Baylor moves them now to 3-3. They're back to 500. It helped put them with a positive map record, and these tiebreakers are going to start to matter as we get into the spring. For the Bears, unfortunately, Baylor, their season struggles continue. They fall down to 1-6, hoping for a bounce back in the spring. Moving on to Kansas and Minnesota, with the top spot Buckeyes falling and Boise State surging. Kansas, who's currently in third place, can afford very few mistakes against the Minnesota squad, and the Jayhawks did not disappoint. A 3-0 win keeps them tied with Boise State for that third spot, just a few percentage points ahead if you want to get down to the nitty-gritty. And again, map percentage, all those things are going to matter, so a sweep for Kansas was crucial here. Minnesota at 2-4, they had a lot of promise. At one point, they were 2-1 on the season. They're going to hope for a victory next week to kind of get back on track. Again, as we break it down, an epic series between Boise State and Ohio State to kind of kick things off. Utah and Kansas both picking up very needed sweeps because, again, these tiebreakers are going to matter more and more as we take a look at our standing. Syracuse on a bye is that second place team. As we go, Ohio State, their first loss, they're at 6-1. Syracuse right there, they're at 5-1. They've got a big matchup coming up this week against Kansas. Boise State right behind them, and then Utah, Minnesota, Baylor, and Nebraska. Those four teams kind of need that spark to kind of break into that top four. Moving on to Valorant, stop me if I sound like a broken record because it was Boise State and Ohio State again in a massive matchup. This time, both squads were undefeated, and this game did not disappoint. Maybe one of the Valorant match of the year. Ohio State takes game one in a 13-11 nail-biter. Hamburger picks up 26 kills in the win before a gritty team win for Boise State. Every single Bronco had between 14 and 16 kills. Nobody popped off. The team came together. It 13-8, forces a map 3, and of course we needed overtime to figure out who the top team in the PEC was going to be. The Buckeyes went up 13-12, and it was time for maybe the pop-off moment of the year from Dez to clinch this series for Ohio State.
They only have 35 seconds to make a decision. Their bond is still all the way in spawn as Skelsis is walking towards
30 seconds left.
Guys, get some info. Please don't peek that. You don't need to, but he
he's
does
better.
because he's
He's
better.
better.
So
He's better.
He gets 3.
Make it,
He
Dez!
gets 4.
Come
Oh
on.
my God.
Defenders
Dez
win.
with, again,
What did
like
I
I
say?
mentioned at the very
Don't
beginning
mess
of
with
the
me.
stream, our top fragger, our
Absolutely insane from Dez again. I think that's the highlight of the year. Michigan State, the defending champs, much like we saw in Rocket League, they quickly handled their business. They took down Nebraska 2-0. They are now 5-2. They keep pace, with the Broncos and the Buckeyes. Absolutely insane series from Heron, by the way. 36-12. That's a 3-0 KD in the series to help secure the win. For the Cornhuskers, the loss drops them down to 1-6. Just didn't quite go their way. They're going to regroup heading into the final week. And finally, Utah has been quietly lurking in the standings this year. They're just a game behind the Spartans, and they kept up their winning ways. A 2-0 win over Baylor to move to 4-3. Another strong outing from Superman with 41 kills this series helped the Utes from being upset. And for the first time maybe all year, PEC kill leader Truth Messenger struggled, posting a negative KD. The Bears, they fall to 1-7. They're going to get the bye week. They're going to figure things out. I think this is a very, very talented Bears roster that maybe turns things around in the spring as we take a look at our results here between the never mind, excuse me, I forgot about Kansas, Minnesota. I apologize, Jayhawks and Gophers, because this was a series. We lost this one in the sauce with Buckeyes and the Broncos, but this one, with both teams near the bottom of the standings, who knew it was going to be a great chance to get back on track? We went all 3 games. The Jayhawks took the series game 1, 14-12 in overtime, and then Minnesota came roaring back, 13-7, 4 Gophers posting 1+ KDs, and now both teams head into the final week of the year at 2-5 and kind of lurking in the standings. We take a look again, Boise State and Ohio State, maybe the match of the year. The Buckeyes have another big one coming up. Michigan State handled business. Utah, don't sleep on the Utes at 4-3, and Minnesota picks up a big win as well as we take a look at the Valorant standings. Again, 1 week left in the season. Ohio State, they're going to play Michigan State. This could, if Michigan State wins, we could have chaos atop the standings. Boise State sandwich in between them at 6-1. Utah and Syracuse, the Orange on a bye, have won 3 in a row. Look out for them. Minnesota, Kansas down at 2-5. Both those teams look scary in their game. And then Nebraska and Baylor down there at the bottom. Again, I think this Baylor squad is more talented than that record shows. And in the spring, they're going to be a force to reckon with. And as we wrap up week 8 with some PEC smash, we kick off with Boise State, Ohio State. Stakes a little bit lower than we saw in Valorant and Overwatch. Both teams coming in at 1-4, trying to find some promise and be that fringe title contender that some people thought they were. It was a quick 2-0 for Boise State, 14-9, 14-6. Melfor for the Broncos, only dropping 1 stock across both series. A very impressive win. The Broncos, they're now 2-4, only a couple games out of 4th place, while for the Buckeyes, the loss, it does knock them down. They are at 1-5. Moving on to Michigan State and Nebraska, this was a 1-2 showdown. The Spartans bringing in a perfect record, a 10-0 game record, and they continue to prove why they're the best team in Smash right now. They 2-0 the Cornhuskers. They keep the perfect record intact, but barely, as Game 1 needed a tiebreaker between Smoothie and Suspect to see if Michigan State could remain undefeated.
Tech chase from Suspect with the down throw, but Smoothie gets the pivot grab right there. Smoothie's not gonna let Suspect get the win just like that. Get the boomerang. Very tense scenarios. Smoothie keeping Suspect away. Suspect is struggling to approach. He needs to find just one clean hit. Is that gonna be it? The electric wind caught fist into the up B, and that is gonna be Game 1 for Michigan State University.
Minnesota and Kansas wrap up the week in PEC Smash. The Gophers have been looming as a top 4 team all year. The Jayhawks try to break into that top 4, but Minnesota slammed the door shut early. They sweep the Jayhawks. They finish up the fall 5-2, a 16-5, 13-8 victory. Left little doubt that the Gophers, who will end the season, the fall season at worst, in a tie for second. Meanwhile, for the Jayhawks, they're at 3-3, looking for that sort of first marquee win to propel themselves into that top 4, into that title conversation. I'm going to talk with Carson a little bit later on if maybe Kansas can bump into that top 4. As again, as we saw, Boise State, Michigan State, and Minnesota sweeps across the board. Syracuse, that maybe that number 2 team, they've got a massive matchup this week as we take a look at our standings with 1 week left to go in the season. Again, Minnesota's on a bye next week, so they lock in a 5-2 record. Michigan State at 6-0. Syracuse and Nebraska, they're both 4-2. Kansas right there at 3-3. Boise State 2-4. Ohio State and Baylor round out the rest of the league. But again, we've got a couple of massive matchups. We've also got some teams who are running through it. And as I said, Carson Kass going to join us live on the program. We're going to break down the fall. We're going to talk about Michigan State Smash. We're going to talk about Baylor Rocket League. Can they run the table and head into Vegas undefeated? Carson joins us next, coming up on PEC Match Point.
My friends know me as Derek, but I'm also Master Sergeant Raxter. This is my life in the Air National Guard.
Welcome back into PEC Match Point. It's time to go inside the PEC and take a look back at everything that's been happening this fall. Big shout out to the Idaho Air National Guard helping you bring PEC Match Point every single week. But if you want to get more from Around the Power Esports Conference, head over to the official PEC website for everything you need, from power rankings and player profiles to predictions and analysis on the biggest matchups of the season. Stay informed, stay connected, and stay ahead of all things PEC. Head on over to pec.leagueos.gg. And speaking of power rankings, he's been a staple on PEC Match Point every single week with his power rankings. Joining us now is Carson Kass. No power rankings today, though, Carson. I need your help to look back on the fall in the PEC. Yes, I know we have 1 more week left, but for the most part, I feel like the standings are pretty much well intact. How you doing tonight? You ready to look back on the fall with me?
I'm doing so well. I'm very excited for the future of this conference going into the spring. This has been a very fun fall, and I think it's kind of setting us up for what could be a really, really fun spring.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to talk a lot about what Vegas looks like. Of course, that's where everybody's going to meet up after the spring plays. Now, there is one team, as we start with Rocket League, that is fully done with the fall. That is the Baylor Bears. They have a bye this week, so they are done, and the Rocket League squad is cooking. 8-0, I want to say a 24-3 match record overall. Can anyone, Carson, keep up with them, or is this a team that basically is going to walk into Vegas most likely undefeated with all the national championship expectations?
Look, I'd put the house right now on 16-0 for Baylor. Their defense is absolutely stalwart, a complete brick wall. You cannot get past them, it feels like. We talked about early in the season how we were a little bit kind of worried as they had a tough game against Nebraska, but going further into it, there's not much you can do against this Baylor defense. We saw it against Syracuse. We saw it against Boise State. They are so good between the margins on the defensive end that it's rare you get a score on them. Talk about shutting out some of those top teams in the PEC, in conference and out of conference. And it's going to be a really interesting rest of the fall and this last week to see where teams are at really finally. But as we jump into the spring, this team is kind of set to prime up. I don't think anybody is there other than maybe Boise State.
And you mentioned one of those teams that kind of want to say gave Baylor a scare, but I believe Syracuse did take a game off of them. And I want to touch on the Orange, right? Because as we talked about, it's Baylor, it's Boise State, it's Michigan State, kind of 1, 2, 3. Syracuse is quietly lurking, had a very tough schedule, started 1-3 with those 3 losses to the 3 teams I just mentioned. Now all of a sudden they're 4-3, won 3 in a row, looking like one of the hottest teams in the league. Are they legit, Carson? Or is this just a case of you backloaded your schedule with easier teams and now you're reaping the rewards, but come Vegas, Syracuse is just going to kind of fall to those top 3?
They got kind of dealt a weird hand with that schedule, especially for the Rocket League team. It's a really young team. I do think this team is a contender come spring and come Vegas. But right now, I think they're kind of a little bit in that lower margin, in that 4th spot there where they belong, because Syracuse had a tough start. They weren't really acclimatized to playing together in the PEC. But I think as it goes on, we're going to see this team get better. I think they will be a real contender, and they'll be a Cinderella story potentially come Las Vegas, but I don't think it's anywhere near that. If you've been paying attention, the Syracuse squad gets better exponentially every week in and out of conference. It's going to be really interesting to see how they do come springtime, but right now I think they deserve that 4th spot, and I think that they are coming for more.
I'm going to put you on the spot real quick, Carson. Do they get a win over one of the top 3 teams in the spring? They took Boise to 5. Do you think that when we go to Vegas, Syracuse is going to have a win over the Spartans, the Broncos, or the Bears, any of them?
I would honestly say they're going to go 2-1. I think they're going to split against Boise State. I said that at the beginning. I think both teams are really good. I think they don't play each other enough. They don't scrim at all is the main thing. I think they just don't know what either of the team is expecting, and come around, I guess, in springtime, I think they're going to split. I also think they're going to split with Michigan State. I would have thought they were going to beat them in the beginning, but I'm going to say they're going to go 2-1. They're going to beat Boise State. They're going to beat Michigan State. It's less likely they beat Boise State, but I don't think they're going to beat the Bears again. I don't think this team is going to be ready. I think you need the time to go fully out and go fully back to Las Vegas before you can even say that this team will be fully ready.
And now let's move on to Overwatch. Let's talk about the team that coming off of Vegas last year was the Overwatch National Championships. They ran through just about everybody. That was Boise State. They come into this year, they run the roster back, and it doesn't start very well, right? They go down to 1-2. At one point, they're in 6th place. There's some smack talk being thrown around the league. Now, all of a sudden, they've won 3 in a row. They just dethroned Ohio State, who was previously the undefeated team in Overwatch, with an insane 3-2 series. They announced they're back, so what do we make of this Broncos team now at 4-2, but with maybe the best win of the season out of everybody?
I think they're a really good team, but I just don't think they're the top dog. But I think any given week, anybody can beat anyone. I do believe that Kansas is a better team right now for whatever reason. I don't know how that kind of transpired. I think they can play a lot better than they've shown in the earlier weeks. This Kansas team has been underrated in how far they've developed. I really think that they're a surprise that's going to come through and get better once we hit the spring season. But I think Boise is still in that top 4, but I don't think they're in that top 2. Syracuse and Ohio State, I think, are still that top 2 teams. And I think Boise State just needs a little bit more. They need to find a way to get past. And as we go through into the semester, they've got a lot of answers they need to address, and a good win against Ohio State's a good start, but I don't think that team is where they need to be right now to be a repeat.
And you kind of hit on the other two teams there that aren't Ohio State again. The Buckeyes, they're at 6-1. I believe their season is also wrapped up for the fall because I think they're on a bye next week. But it's Kansas and Syracuse, and they play each other. This is a de facto second-place game. The Orange are at 5-1. Kansas is at 4-2. Break it down for us. What are you expecting in this Week 9 matchup, Kansas versus Syracuse Overwatch, with a lot on the table?
Look, I'm going to say it's going to be 3-0 Syracuse. I think that loss to Ohio State's a fluke. I think that's a patch day struggle where a lot changed on that patch day, and Syracuse goes down 3-1 to the Buckeyes, and if it was on Monday, it wouldn't have happened that way. They would have won 3-1 in my mind. But I'm going to go 3-0 Orange. There's nothing that I can really see that the Jayhawks have kind of proven to me that the Orange can't match. They're a really good team. The Jayhawks still have a lot to learn, and I think Syracuse is going to outclass them just kind of in almost every sense, especially on that defensive side of push. But other than that, it's just going to be how far can Kansas kind of replicate what they did against Boise State, because I've never seen Kansas play that good. If they can play that good against Syracuse, it really might be a scare. But right now, I've got the Orange 3-0.
And now let's move on to Valorant. This was another game where Boise State and Ohio State, they were 1-2. They were both undefeated. Absolutely insane match. Goes into overtime on Game 3. Crazy pop-off by Dez that we saw earlier in the program. An insane 4K to end it. But the Buckeyes have another big matchup. Now it's them taking on defending champions Michigan State. Break it down for us. Do the Buckeyes suffer a loss, or do they join Baylor as running the table in their game in Valorant after Week 9 is done?
I think the Buckeyes are a sledgehammer right now. I don't see much of a world where they lose to Michigan State, and that's no real mark on Michigan State. You lose 4 players. It's going to be like that early on. I think they have the potential to be as good as Ohio State, but right now they're a little bit in that growing phase as a team. There's 4 freshmen and 1 sophomore playing for that squad, and I just think Ohio State has the experience, and they are a complete sledgehammer right now. I think Ohio State's my championship pick, and I also don't think they're going to lose another one along the way.
Ooh.
They're one of my 2 16-0 teams, which we'll show in the art. There'll be another article later. I look forward to that on pc.edge.legos.gg. But I think they're going to be one of the 2 teams that go 16-0 this year, and it's because of Dez and guys like Hamburger. I mean, they are just crushing it.
Now, Rocket League and Overwatch, it feels like those are 4-team races, right? What about Valorant? Right now, we've got 3 teams with 1 loss or less: Ohio State, Michigan State, and Boise State. That might change, as kind of you alluded to. But Utah's kind of lurking at 4-3. You're Orange, who, by the way, I don't know how they do it, started 0-4. They're now 3-4. They're looming. Do you believe in Utah or Syracuse? Or at the end of the day, is this truly an Ohio State, Michigan State, Boise State versus the field kind of take going into Vegas?
I'm going to go with the latter there. I do think it's going to be those top 3 teams, but credit where credit's due. Utah and Syracuse are both teams that aim very well, and that update mid-season that kind of brought out an entirely different way to play the game, the counter-strikeification, if you will, of that aim. And it helped those teams a lot, but I think that they'd need a real Cinderella kind of moment to go back up. I don't think they're going to make it far because these other teams are just so good, and no discredit to these 2 teams, but I think their table has just been kind of where they need it to be right now, and they'll be competing for the midfield and kind of looking to get that bronze medal between the 2 of them. I think they're all the 2 best teams in the midfield, but we'll have to see as we go on, because obviously different semesters, you have an entire 3 months to practice basically, and it's going to be whoever wants it more is going to win, I think, Valorant at that top 3, and even maybe one of those 2 teams gets into the top 3 and makes it a 4-horse race. I mean, there's only 1 horse, but...
Well, speaking of that, again, Smash, another game where it's really 4 teams, and we'll talk about it, but we also kind of had that thoroughbred out front just running away, and that is Michigan State. The Spartans are undefeated. They haven't even dropped a game so far, and, apologies to their upcoming opponent, but Ohio State, I don't think that changes in Week 9. Can anyone stop Michigan State, or are they going to join Baylor and Ohio State in that perfect mark in Vegas?
The new format this season has really worked out for them because they have a very big fluctuating team that can play kind of anywhere, and they have a lot of guys who are wild cards. They are excellent. It's very fun to watch. They might be 16-0, but I think they drop 1 to a team on the way home. Syracuse, again, is going to improve as the semester goes on. It's one of those things where they are such young teams. You think about guys like Sarah. I think that they're going to fall along the way, but right now Michigan State is real good, and it's hard to deny that. They've got one heck of a roster that kind of consists of 2 elite players who are more in that one or two character range. Then you go down, and everyone else seems to be able to play. They seem to have somebody for everyone in the sense of they can find a way to beat you. They're a very smart team, and they're going to come at you aggressively, and you're not going to be able to really get ahead of them. They don't start slow. They don't end slow. They are a machine out in East Lansing, but I don't think they're going to go undefeated the whole season. But I think that they are a pretty strong favorite to win it all in Smash.
Now let's talk about the other 3 that are right behind them, right? And help us, power ranking guru Carson, figure out how we do 2 through 4. And I know somebody's going to say, actually, Fish, we have tiebreakers. They've all beat each other in head-to-head, and that's your traditional tiebreaker. Yeah. I'm talking about Nebraska, Syracuse, and Minnesota. Minnesota beat Syracuse. Syracuse beat Nebraska. Nebraska beat Minnesota. They're probably going to end the split with the same record at 5-2. Handicap that for me. Where are we 2 through 4 in Smash?
I'm going to be honest, I'm real high on the Golden Gophers. I think they're my 2. Ooh. Nebraska is great, and that was a really good win, but I didn't see what I normally see out of Minnesota that night. I don't know if it was because of Nebraska, but Minnesota plays a very good brand in the sense of I think they're that 2 team. I think they're going to be in that silver medal match, or at the very worst, maybe tournament puts them in that 3rd place match, but they're going to be my 2. I'm going to have Syracuse at my 3. I think that they're better than Nebraska in the sense of syrup being very, very good, and that team kind of playing around each other. They get better every week, and I just think they're not going to get much better from that loss. Nebraska's not going to get much better from that loss. I think they're going to be at my 4, but again, we talk about this a lot. This can go any way any given week. Mm-hmm. I think Syracuse, it's a bit different for Michigan State, but I think Syracuse, Nebraska, Minnesota, you mentioned, it's a circle of excellence. Anybody can beat anybody any given week, no matter what the time is. I mean, it depends on what you eat or what you wake up and what side of the bed you're on each morning. It's kind of that much of a toss-up.
And final question for you, Carson, right? Obviously, you've locked in Baylor Rocket League's going to run the table. You locked in that Ohio State Valorant's going to run the table. You gave Michigan State a chance that you said they might drop a game. Of those 3 teams, Michigan State Smash, Ohio State Valorant, and Baylor Rocket League, who do you think is the most dominant PEC team? I know they won't play each other, but we have this debate all the time. Who's the most dominant? You've got to cross-compare games.
It's going to be the Baylor Bears for me. That defense is absolutely stalwart. You know, I'm a Chicago native. I'm a Chicago native, excuse me. And the 85 Bears, they have a special place in my heart. And the Baylor Bears are doing quite the same thing down there in Waco. It's a really good team that just plays so well around each other. They're a unique team. You love to see fun gimmicks work, and that's what they are. They've got 2 amazing kind of all-around players, and they've got a guy who crashes into people for lack of, I mean, that's what he does, and it's awesome. It's a fun game to watch, and I think the Bears are the most dominant in the sense of you really can't score on them. When they make a mistake, I mean, it's such a small one that you've really got to be a really good team to expose that.
Well, Carson, I appreciate you. We've got one more week of the fall. Maybe before the spring starts, we'll have you back on, and we'll kind of look ahead to Vegas. But Carson Kass, thanks for joining the program again, man. And as he said, go over to pec.leagueos.gg. He's got a new article coming out very soon. They're always a hit to read. Appreciate you having you on, man.
Thank you very much.
Well, we look ahead to Week 9 in the PEC. Carson and I touched on it. There's a couple of massive matchups in Valorant and in Overwatch that you need to have your eyes on. We have all the details. It's coming up next on PEC Match Point.
My friends know me as Derek, but I'm also Master Sergeant Raxter. This is my life in the Air National Guard.
Welcome back back into PEC match point. One more week left in the fall PEC season. Should be a good one. Cannot wait. Again, big shout out to the Idaho Air National Guard. Bring you PEC match point every single week. And now let's take a look ahead to the final week of matchups here for the fall season at least. We've got Michigan State and Ohio State Valorant, the must-watch game between these two very talented teams. Kansas taking on Syracuse. As we heard from Carson, this is a massive Overwatch. Second place on the line between these two teams. Nebraska taking on Boise State. Curious to see how the Cornhuskers Smash team responds against the hot Boise State roster. And we wrap up the week with Utah versus Minnesota. Minnesota's Rocket League team, they might be able to pull off a major win in this one. Cannot wait to see. Let's take a look at PEC Rocket League as the fall season comes to an end. Everybody's chasing Baylor, who's on a bye this week at 8-0. Last year's runner-up Michigan State looking to hold on to that third place spot. They're heading in at 5-2. They're going to take on 2-5 Ohio State. That we heard from their director, the Buckeyes director, a few weeks ago. They have quite a few young players who might get some action. This could be an entirely different roster for Ohio State, maybe heading into the spring, and that might catch some people off guard. Curious to see if the Spartans will be able to keep pace with Baylor and Boise State, or if the Buckeyes can deal a massive blow to their title chances for Michigan State. Defending champs Boise State, they hope to finish the fall with just a single loss. They're at 6-1 right now. They've looked strong throughout the year. That one hiccup to Baylor withstanding. They're going to take on a Nebraska team who's shown flashes at time at 2-5, maybe giving Baylor the biggest run for their money, which is maybe a huge shock for everybody. They're hoping to pull off a major upset, and we'll see. Again, the defending champs trying to keep pace with Baylor. Utah and Minnesota square on a battle off of teams who they're looking for the break to just kind of forget their starts to the year and start fresh. Utah was the last obstacle in the way of Baylor's perfect season last week. They were swiftly handled. And Minnesota, the Gophers came so close to picking up their first win of the year against Kansas in an insane Game 5, falling just short. I think both these teams are way more talented than their record shows, and I think this is going to be a fun series. And Kansas and Syracuse, they're going to wrap up the fall season in quietly a battle for fourth place. Both teams enter at 4-3. The Orange coming off a bye, maybe the hottest team not named Baylor in PEC Rocket League, winners of 4 of their last 5. Kansas, they've been up and down all year, nearly got upset by Minnesota as we saw earlier in the show. They're hoping to put that all behind them because, again, both these teams want to end the fall semester in that 4th place spot. Moving on to Overwatch, the PEC season had a dramatic turn as the previously undefeated Buckeyes fell and the standings have been left wide open at 6-1. And with the Buckeyes on a bye, everybody's trying to chase them down. Boise State's going to kick the week off. The defending champs announced we are back. A huge win over Ohio State. They have established themselves as a threat once again. They're 4-2, and they can't afford a letdown game against a last-place Nebraska team that is hoping to maybe draw some inspiration from Minnesota's heroics in Rocket League to bring even more chaos to the standings. Utah and Minnesota going to face off of teams who just are looking for that consistency heading into the spring season. Both these teams had some very different starts. The Utah Utes started very slow. They've now rallied back to 3-3. The Gophers, meanwhile, on the opposite end, they were 2-1. People maybe had them as a fringe 4th place title contender. They unfortunately now have fell all the way down to 2-4 and looked to get things back on track. And week 9 of the PEC Overwatch wraps up for a battle for second place. Syracuse and Kansas going to square off. The Orange could find themselves tied with the Buckeyes in the standings if they pick up a win. Well, the Jayhawks certainly not only want to chase down first place, they've got Boise State in their rearview mirrors and really right on their tail. They want to put some distance between themselves and the defending champs. This game feels like a must-win game, which is crazy to say for teams that are in the top half of the standings, but they both need a win, and they both love a sweep for those tiebreaker points. Moving on to Valorant, it wraps up with maybe the best game of the week in terms of overall across the PEC, and it starts with the perfect Ohio State Buckeyes. A 2-1 win over Boise State last week. Chaotic Game 3. Maybe the play of the year from Dez, as we saw earlier in the show. They have a chance to go 8-0 and join Baylor in that perfect run, but to do it, they have to take down defending Valorant champs Michigan State. The Spartans enter at 6-1, a lone loss to Boise State all the way back in week 3. It might not be the same team up north that the Buckeyes usually draw their ire in for the final week of the year, but make no mistake, this is a massive championship implication game. This could even be a national championship preview between these two squads. Cannot wait to watch this one. Boise State suffered their first loss of the year in a thrilling 2-1 loss against the top-ranked Buckeyes. the Broncos still find themselves in second place. And no, one mistake from Ohio State can put them back into first. They're taking on a Nebraska team who has shown brilliance at times. Nebraska leads the PEC in games 3 played. Yeah, I don't think this will be an easy one for the Broncos. We'll see how they rebound. Utah and Minnesota, they find themselves on opposite ends of the standings and really in opposite places from what a lot of people predicted. The Gophers were getting some fringe national championship hype at the start of the year. They're 2-5. Meanwhile, for Utah, they've quietly assembled a strong start in their debut season. They're 4-3, 4th place, a very talented roster with some big names. They could maybe be poised to make a second half run. And Syracuse and Kansas, they basically find themselves in identical positions to Utah and Minnesota. The Orange started the year at 0-4, but like Utah, they've quietly racked up some wins, looking to end the year on a 4-game winning streak. For the Jayhawks, a 2-5 start has been full of what-ifs, and a couple breaks maybe could find Kansas on the opposite end of the standings. This one has a lot of spring implication for whoever wins. And wrapping up the fall season with Smash, it's Michigan State on top, and everybody's chasing them. They could join Baylor and potentially Ohio State Valorant with a perfect split. Right now, they're 6-0. They haven't even dropped a map. They're taking on 105 Ohio State. If the Spartans win and they get a 12-0 record, they might be the most dominant team across the PEC. We'll have to see how they do. Boise State facing off against Nebraska. The Cornhuskers suffered a recent 2-0 loss to Michigan State after a very hot start. They've lost 2 in a row. For Boise State, it's been a tough season. They had a bright spot recently with the 2-0 win over Ohio State, and this is going to be a great litmus test to see exactly where the Broncos and Cornhuskers stand heading into the spring. Syracuse and Kansas finish up PEC Smash with what should be a very intense battle between a pair of teams. So the Orange at 4-2, they can end the year in second, or end the fall, I should say, in second place with Minnesota if they pick up a win. Meanwhile, the Jayhawks, and like a lot of titles for Kansas, they're just kind of lurking in that 5th place spot, 3-3. Maybe a win jumps them into title contention. A loss, they're going to have to turn things around. They're right now, of course, at 3-2. And that's going to do it. Again, we've got some massive matchups across the board for Week 9 in the PEC. Cannot wait to see who comes out on top. And it's shaping up to be a very exciting one. Again, this is the final week of the fall semester. We've got the whole spring in front of us. The records carry over. Everybody chasing down those teams at the top, and it should be a ton of fun. Make sure you stay caught up on all the action across the league here, not only on PEC Match Point, but don't forget to head over to pec.leagueos.gg for everything PEC. PEC Match Point, of course, brought to you by the Idaho Air National Guard. Good luck to all of the teams. Cannot wait to see what the spring semester brings us.